Welcome. It's 7 o'clock. The library is closed. It's performance time for council. Welcome. I'd like to call to order our community meeting, regular meeting of council, I should say, for Wednesday, August 2nd, 2017. It is exactly 7 p.m. And we have an agenda which was circulated. I look first for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz seconding. All those in favor? I didn't ask if there was any deletions or additions, so we scurried through that. We'll just work with what we have. Which brings us to our first item. We do have a delegation, an appointment for this evening, Mr. Ray Parfitt, representing Trail Bay Estates, to bring to our attention some aspects of the Binney traffic study. Ray, if you'd like to come forward, and we'll turn the microphones on and welcome you.
Your Worship, Council, purpose of this delegation is to address the final Binney report that's dated July the 28th, 2017, particularly as it relates to Council Agenda Item 10.1 tonight, the public hearings for the Clayton family lands. The March 29th Binney report, the initial report presented to Council on May the 3rd, 2017, resulted in several applications in West Sechelt going back to public hearing, which we're looking at hopefully coming forward in the future here. The Binney report was discussed between developers and staff at a meeting on May the 15th, and several issues were raised at that meeting. Traffic counts, housing units in the catchment area, the absorption rates of the developments, and the selection of off-site roadwork improvements. Clayton Family Land subsequently funded a peer review by CTS Engineering that looked at the Binney report and its assumptions and the data within the report, identified several mistakes related to traffic counts at Norwest Bay Road and Highway 101, as well as unit counts in several developments and associated traffic generation numbers. The July 28, 2017 final Binney report shows a reduction of 477 residential units in the Clayton family lands, additional 78 new units with RTC in the Wharf Avenue development, a reduction of 749 units in the Sengera Silverstone subdivision, inclusion of 132 congregate care beds. This resulted in daily traffic counts that were substantially changed. Clayton's were down to 116 versus original 890, Spaney 180 versus original 120, and Sengera at 186 versus original 908. The March Binney report talked of horizon years of 2020, 2025, and 2035, whereas the final Binney report just addresses the year 2035 as a horizon year for improvements. The July 28th Binney report presents only the Shorncliffe Highway 101 intersection as a candidate roadwork for improvements by the developers. And it's deleted Derby Road Extension, Tyler Road Extension, Clayton Avenue as candidate roadworks that were spelled out in the original report. Shorncliffe intersectional analysis, to summarize it, shows that there's approximately 1,185 vehicles per hour AM and PM going through the intersection. Through traffic on Highway 101, there's approximately 880 vehicles, or approximately 75%. The traffic from and onto Shorncliffe includes a total of 295 vehicles per hour at peak hours, which results in a percentage of about 25% on that leg of the intersection. I guess in summary, the July 28th report identifies considerable reduction in developers' unit counts. The intersection analysis shows minor change in service levels at the level of service levels from C to F. It still is a failing intersection according to the Binney report. It recommends cost-sharing formula based on developers' unit count, talks of the horizon year of 2020. However, it doesn't provide a capital cost estimate for improvements. The original report looked at 2020 improvement cost for laning of about $50,000 in the year 2020.
Thank you very much. As you note, we'll get back to this at a later item on the agenda, but before we leave you, I just ask if any of the councillors had questions or clarifications to help when we do get to that session. I had just a process issue to staff, if I may. When delegations submit a request to come on to a council meeting, that's normally done a week or so in advance because they're on the draft agenda that we look at on Wednesday and Thursday. Is that correct? So the request to come and speak would have been done 10 days ago, on the Friday before the draft agenda? Last Wednesday. And I'm asking because it seemed a little curious to have a delegation submit to speak to a report that wasn't out until July 28th. So I'm just, obviously you were thinking in advance that you weren't going to be happy with the report. Just a note to all of us. And any councillors wanting to watch? Then seeing none, thank you very much. And we'll come back to this later, as you know, and speak to it. And oh, if you've got a couple more minutes of quick, sure. Yeah, I didn't realize there'd be two speakers. That's fine. Sorry, I didn't get the microphone on. And perhaps I didn't for Ray. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to say a little bit from what happens if some of these things get in front of you before any of us as developers get to see anything. And we tried to stop the last report because we saw how flawed it was, but it was too late to do anything. We only were given 24 hours, and in spite of having all our consultants say that the report was all flawed, it still got tabled and we lost all our things. I did speak to a couple of councillors to say, can't we table it and we'll give you a correct report. We did let Vinnie use all the correct numbers to try to fix up the report. Otherwise, it could have taken another 16 months, and we couldn't do that. But the thing was, I think the thing that we're fearful for us, especially with these kind of gray conditions that have now been added to this report, that we can't go into a development where we might have serious situations on some of the roads, especially Tyler, because we're up on a hill. We need to cut and fill the development. We need to maintain the chance to do the building of our own roads. Otherwise, when we have severe slopes, and I'll be prepared to bring some pictures there, we can't do the cut and fill, locate the driveways, have the K values working on the lot. So we really can't just dedicate land unless we're going to build it. Now, we built all those roads ourselves, so we know the difficulty when you have steep slopes. So that's why it's really serious on us to just do the 2A in Lot 7, because if we bring that in, then that really creates we've done all the engineering for all the whole complete area, the next 20 acres, so we know that the problems that we see. So we need to do it in a staged area, do the cut and fill. So to give a piece of property where we may have to do work on it separately or have someone else do the work would cause a horrific problem with our development. That's why it's very serious about not having those things tied into something previous, which is what they're talking about with Tyler Road when we're dealing far south of that, okay? So that's what I had to stress. And I tried to speak to Sanath about it and Aaron, but their experience is not the same as what we have already working up there. So we wanted to stress that. And I didn't want to get into a meeting where we couldn't talk to anyone before. So we're prepared to come this week again and speak to staff and engineering and again explain that, which we've been saying over the last year, how important it is, okay? That's all.
Okay, thank you. And there will be lots of open discussion at the public hearing, and I'll take into account what Mr. Parfit noted to make sure there isn't new information. We don't want to delay the public hearings, but that's normally where some of this would come out. So we'll follow that. Just to correct one small thing between professionals, the CTS report and the Mr. Binney's report, they were very careful not to use the word mistake or flawed, but draw attention to things that needed to be validated because there is disagreement, but they didn't consider them to be mistakes. I read all of Binney's reports. I read all of CTS's. I found the diagrams most exciting and interesting. 2 bicycles every hour or whatever. I mean, it's actually quite revealing when you do traffic studies and counts and see what's actually going on there. But just to protect the professional reputations of both engineers, they were quite careful to talk about validation as opposed to flaws and mistakes.
And we did offer them, give them all the corrected information, which we did, so they got to use that. Otherwise, you'd have to go and redo the whole report again.
That's right. And Mr. Binney did incorporate the CTS work to give a more complete picture.
Correct it.
And that's important to note that it was incorporated. Thank you for both of that. We'll try and do our best to take that into account when we get to the next item. And thank you, Sarah, for turning that microphone off. Moving along then, we're at item 5, adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting. And those are on pages 5 to 18. And first I'd look for a motion to receive Councillor Shanks and Councillor Lutz. Any errors or omissions that people saw? I saw a couple of very, very minor rewordings, but it's just a choice of language. Otherwise, I was really impressed. I thought they were good minutes for somebody who's just been with us about a month. It's good. If there's no errors or omissions, I look for a motion to adopt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? None opposed. Are there any business arising from those minutes? If I see no business arising, we'll move to item 7, which is the committee minutes and reports, and we'll start with the minutes of the Planning and Community Development Committee, which is pages 19 to 35. First, a motion to receive. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seeger, second. All those in favor? And are there any errors or omissions? And in a moment, the chair of that committee will probably recuse himself, but first I'll ask if there are any of the items, recommendations that want to be pulled out for direct discussion. Councillor Seegers?
Sorry, I believe there was an error, but I'll look to staff for this. On recommendation number 19,
Is this,
on page 12. Oh, it says at the top 12 of 17. It does, there's no page number at the bottom.
page 30 of our agenda and page 12 of the report?
Yes, in recommendation 19, I believe the motion was to schedule an open house consultation session, but also to set up an online survey or a online feedback, but I don't remember the wording and if it actually got into the recommendation or if it was just a separate conversation. I thought it was in the recommendation.
Or was the open house meant to be an e-town hall
No,
as well? It's
no,
separate.
it was to do some, the example that I put forward at that time was that the regional district just did online consultation for their short-term rentals. And given we were just looking for input here, it would be actually a way for the public to actually contribute without having to attend in person.
So we have the note under that it was noted that an online
Yes.
feedback, but you.
But I
wondering if
believe
should
it was
be
in the motion, yes.
Does the chair remember that discussion?
Sorry, I don't.
Okay. Staff?
Okay,
Okay. Okay, so
Okay.
we agree that it would increase accessibility and we want to do that.
okay, thank you.
Okay, and we've all heard that. If there's no items to be pulled, I think then Councillor Shanks probably wants to recuse himself because we'll vote in them as a package, which will include Councillor Shanks has a potential conflict of interest on the SSC properties because of a change of corporate ownership in the community. He's now employed by one of the shareholders, I guess, or principals of SSC. I think he's duly gone. If there's a motion then to adopt recommendations, let's start with not 2, but they're business items, with 3 through to 28. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Any discussion of any of those items? All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. And Mr. Shanks can be invited back into the meeting. He's probably locked himself out. Thank you. And I noted as you were leaving that I forgot to mention that at the beginning. I usually do the call to order and then remind people of any potential conflicts of interest. And it's always important to follow those. So the next committee meeting was the committee meeting. We have minutes of the committee meeting of the whole for July 19th, item 7.2. Motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Any errors or omissions in those? All those in favor? That's carried. And then we move to minutes of the Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee of July 26th. A motion to receive. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Any errors or omissions in the Public Works Committee meeting? And if nothing's been noted, I'd look for a motion to adopt recommendations 4 through to 8 Councillor Seegers and seconded by Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And that's carried. Any business arising from any of the committee meetings that wasn't adopted in recommendations or other items? Councillor Wright?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. On the Planning and Development Committee, there was one recommendation, number 23, and it was a recommendation that it be denied. And that recommendation for denial was defeated.
Yes.
So in actual fact, for those in the audience, that means that the variance was approved.
Yes. The application from the Sechelt, the motion was that it be denied and it was defeated. Did you then have another vote?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
I just want that clear for some people in the audience because I see the questioning look out there. So that means that the variance was then approved.
The next motion.
And then 24,
Yep.
item 24 makes
Yep. Thank you very much.
the positive motion.
Yep.
Yes, approved with the following conditions. Because, yeah, so the parking variance was defeated, so it could be approved with some conditions. We're all happy. And we had a long discussion today on transportation in the committee of the whole. And we're all going to use less cars and less parking stalls and find other ways of getting around downtown. Okay, moving away from minutes to the business items, bylaws. Item 8.1. First, we have a motion to receive the report, which is on page 44. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And Mr. Thompson, do you want to speak to this? Actually, you don't have any choice. We would like you to speak to this.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have a brief presentation for this item. So this is RTC's Property Limited's rezoning application for the properties located on the waterfront at the intersection of Shorncliffe and Highway 101. Yeah, as you can see here, shown in the drawing, the three properties subject of the rezoning. So a bit of the background, the bylaw is currently sitting at first reading. It had a public hearing, and following that public hearing, council requested that additional public consultation be done. There was an open dialogue session held at the Seaside Center on March 29th of this year, which presented an opportunity for local residents to come and talk, to speak with the developer. And there was much discussion on both sides very passionately about this project. Since then, the applicant has revised the proposal, and the purpose of this report is to present the revised proposal to council to alter the bylaw and to then bring it forward to another public hearing. So getting into the alterations of the bylaw, there has been general text amendments and improvements to the layout of the bylaw, just those small word changes, shifting some of the paragraphs, etc. There has been the added definition for a maximum building width added to the base zoning bylaw, and then adding a maximum building width of 45 meters to subzone A's to ensure that no building will be longer than 45 meters facing the street. This was done to alleviate the concerns that it would create a wall blocking the ocean front, so it would have the massing broken up. This is more almost a text amendment than anything, but changing the proposed Snicket Park expansion from being included in the CD 39 zone to just being zone PA1 immediately. That's just it's kind of to simplify it. The base density was reduced from 45 units to 20 units, and the maximum density was reduced from 48 units to 31 units. So quite a significant decrease in the density. There's also been a reduced setback from the north property line from 6 meters to 5 meters. So that's the property line facing Highway 101. And a reduced setback from the east lot line from 6 meters to 4.5 meters, and that's the property line facing Shorncliffe Avenue. And then it's also a reduction of the maximum height of the tallest building to 13.5 meters, and that was from 20.5 meters. So that's also quite a significant decrease in height. and that would be the highest, and that's the highest building in the site that's located closest to the highway, away from the ocean. Then there was changes to the community amenity contribution framework. So a bit of clarity was provided with the first item. So it was rather than just saying providing cultural or recreational facilities in the forms of location satisfactory to the district, we provide that detail in there to both spell it out to the community and for the developer. And so that was defined as providing the improvements to the Snicket Park expansion, including a 2-meter wide trail, bollard lighting, removal of invasive species, landscaping with native species, and public gathering space. The affordable housing contribution was increased from 1 unit to 2 units, or a cash in lieu contribution. Added a requirement of 50% of the units being constructed to an accessible or adaptable standard. Added a requirement for the construction of the Camden Road beach access trail, and that was from removing a trail that was located on the property that was kind of just going through the one edge of the property to actually just improving the beach access that's currently undeveloped. And then adding the 1,597 square meter dedication to the Snicket Park expansion as part of the community amenities. So my recommendations are that council endorses those changes to the bylaw as shown here. And then that just as a technicality, the first reading has to be rescinded, and then council can give it first reading again, and then staff can be authorized to schedule a public hearing for this bylaw after the finalized traffic impact study from RFB and associations is received. The finalized study hasn't been received as of yet, but due to that this is the only meeting in August and it's expected to be received shortly, we didn't want to delay it. So the traffic impact study will be in the public record before the public hearing is held.
So just on that last point, the July 28th revisions to the Binney traffic impact study were not the final?
This, the RTC project is kind of located in between almost two traffic studies. It does have an impact, of course, on the West Sechelt area, and specifically looking at that intersection of Shorncliffe and Highway 101, and would have a contribution to that. But it also is within the same realm as a downtown traffic impact study, which includes the RTC project, the Prime Signal project, and the Wade project.
So item 5 recommendation is the second, referring to the second study.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll have to put different names on them so we're clear. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much for your report. Councillors have any clarifications needed from staff? And if not, I'd look directly to somebody to move recommendations 2 to 5. Councillor Seegers so moved and Councillor Shanks seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I want to thank those that came to the meeting and of course the developer, although frustrating when they went to the meeting attempting to come up with a plan and or heights and sighting and any amenities that would match what the community directly near and in the surrounding areas would be happy with. They seem to have listened and worked towards that. I look forward to what may come if we pass this and it goes forward to public hearing, to see in terms of what the form and character is going to look like. I look forward to that, and I would encourage and hope that the developer, because they've been amenable so far to some of the recommendations, to take a look at the buildings nearby along the waterfront, and also perhaps go as far as taking a look from an ocean view of the buildings along our waterfront and the sight lines and the materials used and the colors to make sure that the building in a sense matches and or blends into our waterfront as it becomes developed. So it's just an encouraging thought as we move forward to make sure that the development fits in nicely to the other nice developments that are along there, and continues to make Sechelt a beautiful seaside community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I notice at the end of the report it says there's an attachment, public information session notes. I believe the rest of council was at that session. I was not. I did talk with staff, talk with some of the councillors about what happened there, but I'd like to make sure we have that in the public realm as well, and perhaps it could be forwarded.
Mr. Thompson?
I apologize. I thought it was attached, but it is in the public realm and it can be forwarded.
I think it might have just been a printing issue because the hard copy or the electronic copies have them. Any further discussion? Then I'll call the questions, which are the recommendations 2 through 5. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. I think I jinxed the first one, so I'm not going to say a word about this, but I'm glad it's here in front of us and that it's moving forward. And when I am in Davis Bay and I look across at the waterfront, I see a wall of condos starting with the terraces and going to the watermark, and I'm sure this will be better. Now we're going to move to the actual bylaws and the work that we have to do. So the first one is to rescind first reading, and so I need a motion to rescind first reading of zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, amendment bylaw number 25, 274, 2016, RTC properties. Thank you, Councillor Shanks, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. And then I move to the actual bylaw, which we have in front of us as 81B, which is zoning bylaw number 25, 274, 2016, CD 39, RTC properties, which is a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987 by rezoning 3 properties in the downtown Sechelt neighborhood from R1, a single-family residential zone, to a new comprehensive development zone 39, to permit a multifamily residential zone and Public Assembly 1, PA1, Parks, Recreation, and Assembly Zone. First reading is moved by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright seconding. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to item 8.2, we have biosolids disposal fee, and it's coming forward for 3 readings. First, a motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Shanks, Councillor Lutz. And that's the report from the Director of Corporate Services. And would you like to speak to the report?
Thank you, Your Worship. On July 12th at the Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee, our Manager of Financial Services presented a report to recommend that we remove the specific holding tank disposal fee for septic removal or septic disposal, and thus having one charge for all disposals at our septic receiving site. The Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee recommended that go to Council. On July 19th, Council also endorsed those recommendations. So we've now brought forward the actual bylaw amendment for Council's consideration.
Thank you very much. If somebody could, seems redundant, but first we want somebody to move the recommendation that we will go forward with 3 readings. Councillor Wright, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? And then I will go, and one opposed? One opposed. And then we will move forward to the bylaw itself, which is on page 59, and the schedule that we're amending is on page 58, the general biosolids disposal fee. And first reading of bylaw number 483, make sure I get the right one. Corporate officer.
Sorry, Your Worship, just a point of clarification, minor thing. It's just the way it's been stapled. Page 58 is a copy of the schedule from the previous bylaw. It's actually the new bylaw, the amendment bylaw is on page 59, and the schedule follows on 60, where we've removed item 2, the holding tank sewage disposal fee.
Yes.
Our apologies, it's a stapling issue.
And on page 59 is what we want to give first reading to. Bylaw number 483-1, 2009, not 217. A bylaw to amend District of Sechelt biosolids disposal fee. It's bylaw number 483, 2009.
No, actually, that's a typo, and it's the title. Sorry, under item 1, where the bylaw is cited, that should actually be 2017 in the title. It's a title typo.
Okay. And it's also an error in the on page 59, if you'll look at the very first whereas. We're way ahead of ourselves.
Actually, that is correct because, oh, geez, 2009. Sorry.
It reads 3009. Just for
Sorry
those
about that.
aren't following, so we're, okay. Moving, first reading of the amendment, the bylaw as amended by the District of Sechelt, disposal fees bylaw number 483. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright. All those in favor at first reading? It's carried. Yes. Second reading is moved by Councillor Wright, Councillor Shanks. Any discussion at second reading? Councillor Segers.
Thank you. When this first came forward, it was brought forward by the Finance Department, and the report indicated that there was more treatment required for the product, I guess, of holding tanks versus septic fields or septic tanks. I did talk to our engineering department. While they were in favor of the potentially moving this amendment forward, the rationale required some more information, and I still have not been in receipt of that information. So I'm not in favor of moving this forward at this time.
Okay. And the rationale provided at the time was that raw septic required more treatment than composted septic tank sludge. Be that as it may, I think the recommendation was to have a single fee for everything that enters the receiving pond on Dusty Road. Okay. Any further discussion at second reading? All further discussion? Okay, Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. There was also a concern that over what a holding tank and the definition of a holding tank was. And people who had porta potties were coming in and saying, no, this is a holding tank. And so that was part of the rationale for changing the cost on that.
Yes, to get all of the various receptacles to be coming in at the same fee and not getting into technical disputes about what was what and what wasn't. Okay, thank you for that. We're still at second reading. Any further discussion? For or against? Amendments proposed? None. All those in favor? That's carried. All those opposed? And one opposed at second reading. And third reading is moved this evening by Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright. All those in favor of third reading? Any opposed? One opposed? And those are recorded. Thank you. And now we move to 8.3, which is on Oracle Properties. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Shanks, Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And Ms. Lettman has a verbal report to go along with our written report.
We have before us, originally the application for Oracle Properties was received in February 2007, and it was for 55 townhomes. Staff were able to negotiate 6 affordable townhomes units at that time. The zoning was from R1 to R4. In 2013, well, I should say back it up a little bit there, 18 of the 3-story townhomes were constructed as the phase 1, and a housing agreement is registered on the remainder of the title. If we can go to the next page, Sarah, or Connie, there's a drawing there I can possibly point to. Oh, the one with the illustration, that's it. So this is the location of the 18 townhomes that are constructed, and this is the remainder of the property here. So in 2013, the market had been depressed for quite a long time, and the units as well, being 3 stories, weren't very appealing to seniors, which is a major market for real estate in our community. The developer came back in and asked to reverse the zoning on the remainder of the property from R4 residential 4 back to R1 single family residential zone. Staff negotiated that we would remain, instead of 6 units, we would get 2 units. And those were located at this location here in a duplex form, but still remaining part of the strata. And it's a bare land strata, so fees are expected to remain fairly low as a monthly fee. The affordable housing policy was created in 2008, but this had been originally negotiated in 2007. So it doesn't have the same parameters as the housing agreement, the affordable housing policy. So in 2014, Council passed the motion in October that an amendment to the affordable housing agreement registered on the title be approved for a reduction in the number of units provided from 6 residential units to 2 residential units, and that these 2 units be constructed prior to occupancy of any other home in the proposed development, subject to the adoption of the zoning amendment bylaw. And in August 2015, Council passed the zoning bylaw that changed to the zoning illustrated here. And moving forward, due to my own personal medical leave and also this death of the main proponent, his family now wishes to proceed with the development, so they would like to move forward on that. We've brought it forward now for your consideration, the housing agreement covenant, an agreement that must be passed by bylaw in accordance with the Local Government Act. The highlights of the agreement are that the construction and occupancy permit issuance of the affordable units must happen before any occupancy of any of the other bare land strata homes and the two single-family homes as well. The 2-story duplex style building design is going to be either 2 bedrooms plus den or 3 bedrooms. And the units, we have an outline of them in Schedule B and C of the agreement, and they're roughly 1,350 square feet or 130 square meters. We also secured a $200,000 sale price for each affordable unit to a qualified buyer, and those buyers will be going through a process where there's a maximum family income that's allowed, and we'll be looking at criteria to look at those. Just as a point of interest, this will be a loss for the developer. He cannot build these and construct them for this price at $200,000. Typically, right now, in the adjacent 18 townhomes are selling for roughly $350,000. They're slightly larger, but. And also highlights are, if the sales are not successful after 150 days post-construction to qualified buyers, then the developer will give $50,000 times 2 to the district. But we fully anticipate that the units will sell at that price and that we'll be able to find qualified buyers. We'll start a process of finding the qualified buyers once the building permit comes into the district, so that we'll be able to show prospective people who want to apply what the design will look like and what the homes will look like. And then we'll start that 150 countdown after occupancy is granted by the district. The covenant, the housing agreement, remains in perpetuity on Strata Lot 1 and 2, and it will remain there. It's only the district that can remove it, and that's not going to happen if we're successful. Subsequent sales will have to be to also buyers who meet the affordable housing criteria. The removal of the covenant on the remainder of the property, you'll probably get a report back when that needs to happen, because it'll need council's approval to remove it once it's in place from that area of the single family area, because right now it will be going on blanket on the entire area. So it acts as a no-build covenant and a housing agreement. So that's my report.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for clarifying a few things. When this came to us in August of 2015, I don't think the whole story was presented. It was just fourth reading of a rezoning that had been started by the previous council. So when we first got this request to change and amend the housing agreement, took some backtracking on my part to try and add this to the August decision and then to the October decision of the previous council and sort of follow that through. And thank you for explaining what my immediate question was if everything was approved in August 2015 in the hottest market we've seen in decades, why the developer didn't move forward, but there was a death in the principal's family.
Yes.
And that obviously is an explanation for why things don't go forward, because we hear so much about process in this world. And then for clarifying that the covenant will remain in perpetuity, which means the resale, if that should happen, would occur under similar conditions, and the District of Sechelt would be involved at that time as well?
We plan to ask the Sunshine Coast Housing Society to help us with the criteria. Unless they become one of the prospective buyers, then we'll look at perhaps the other planners on the Sunshine Coast or some other neutral party could help us with the criteria. We keep the criteria part very private. We don't release any information to the public on that.
Well, I thought the criteria that were public tonight or were in our package were fairly vague in one sense. So I'm glad to see a little bit more in the covenant itself. And could we consider selling it to a nonprofit or, say, Habitat, for example?
Yes, I believe that's in there if they're interested in purchasing the completed units.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Seegers. So that was one of your questions as well. Any other questions from council? Let's make sure I get the right. So first, we're looking for a recommendation following the report that council give first, second, and third readings to Oracle Properties Housing Agreement Bylaw number 560/2017. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers seconding. And then moving to 8.3B. Oh, sorry, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you for that, slowing me down. And 8.3B, which is the actual agreement and the bylaw. And looking at page 65, we'll have first reading of Oracle Properties Housing Agreement Bylaw number 560/2017, a bylaw to enter into a housing agreement under Section 483 of the Local Government Act, moved by Councillor Seegers and seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? And second reading of Oracle Properties Housing Agreement Bylaw number 560 by Councillor Lutz and Councillor Shanks. Any discussion at second reading? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. And third reading of bylaw by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Seegers. All those in favor of third reading? That's carried with none opposed. And are those units to be built first? So they're entering the market sometime in the next 8 to 12 months?
To, first of all, get through their subdivision process. So,
Minor point. We've got a great subdivision.
but they
approval
will be constructed and finish occupancy before occupancy of any of the other units.
But they may all start building at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Finally, we're moving to some items for adoption, starting with 8.4, Habitat for Humanity. And this is, we do have a report, but it's actually coming to us for adoption. We've had 3 readings of it. So first, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers, all those in favor. And the recommendation that we move to adoption, Councillor Seegers, Councillor Inkster, all those in favor. And then the preliminary or the formal adoption of bylaw number 25/287/2017, Habitat for Humanity, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25/1987 by rezoning a property in the Wilson Creek neighborhood from R4 residential 4 zone to a new R2A residential 2A zone to permit a residential duplex development with educational uses. Adoption has been moved by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? That's carried. Item 8.5, Highway and Parking Amendment Bylaw. Again, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks, seconding. All those in favor? And adoption. Let's motion to recommend adoption. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers, all those in favor? That's carried. And the bylaw itself, Highway and Parking Bylaw number 516-2, 2017, which is the bylaw to amend Highway and Parking Bylaw number 516, 2012, adoption is moved by Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. Item 8.6, report from the corporate officer. Received. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And recommendation to adopt is moved by Councillor Wright and Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? It's carried. And then I move to the bylaw itself. Bylaw number 515-3, 2017, a bylaw to amend bylaw notice enforcement implementation bylaw number 515, 2012. Adoption is moved by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Inkster seconding. All those in favor? That's carried with no opposition. Whenever I run through these without too much mistake, I thank Michael Vaughn, who was our corporate officer, legal counsel in 1997 for his training. Yeah, Michael Vaughn is practicing in Vancouver, but he's one of the municipal lawyers that still does a lot of education for municipal associations and for Capilano College. But he worked for us for 5 or 6 years, and he was an expert on process. Item 8.7, business license amendment bylaw. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers seconding. All those in favor? And the second recommendation that the business license amendment bylaw be adopted, moved by Councillor Seegers and Inkster. All those in favor? It's carried. Then moving to the bylaw. Bylaw number 520-3, 2017, a bylaw to amend business license bylaw number 520, 2012 is adopted. Adoption is moved by Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. And the municipal ticket information bylaw. Report, move recommendation, move receipt of the report. Councillor Seegers, I see, and Councillor Lutz, second. All those in favor? And the recommendation to adopt is moved by Councillor Seegers and Councillor Wright. All those in favor? None opposed. And the item itself, bylaw number 491-2, 2017, a bylaw to amend municipal ticket information MTI, bylaw number 491, 2010. Adoption is moved by Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. 5 items adopted. I never quite know why new business and business items. We're now in business items, item 10 and 10.1, which was discussed by the delegation earlier today. First, there's a recommendation to receive the report from the interim community planner. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks seconding. All those in favor? And is there enough to speak to on this report, Mr. Thompson?
Your Worship, I was just going to give a quick verbal report about the purpose behind this, kind of echoing Mr. Parfit's earlier comments. The purpose of this report is just to have Council receive these traffic impact studies, both the peer review done by CTS and the Binney traffic impact study of July 28th, 2017, so that we can then move forward with scheduling public hearings for both the Spain development, Rockwood Ocean Stories, the Clayton Family Lands rezoning for Phase 2A, the Clayton Family's rezoning for the Westbrook by the Sea facility, and the Clayton's Family Lands rezoning for the for Lot 7 located on the highway for single family as well. So, other than that, it's a very short report.
Thank you. And I noticed the very last line in your written report, page 102 of the agenda, page 2 of your report. The exact wording and conditions of the development agreement are not required prior to public hearing. And you're quite confident with that opinion, and it's not going to find any glitches in the future?
Yes.
Yes, in terms of confidence. Okay. Short and sweet. The CTS final report is linked and can be viewed online. The Binney report is also linked and can be found online. Both of them are fairly thick reports, so I'm glad they weren't reproduced in my agenda package, at least. Discussion or questions or clarification from the development. We'll start with Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I noticed that the recommendation is just that we receive your report at this point. So there's no recommendation here to actually receive the traffic impact study. So I don't know if that's something that you're looking at having us do, but we'll get to that. I did notice in reading this, and I had some of the questions similar to Mr. Parfit, how do we determine the total cost of the works to be done over time on this, with respect to the impact on the various intersections?
So like the actual capital cost of doing the work, that is?
Yes.
Yes. So that's, I guess, still a discussion we're having among staff. The thought is that we would hire, I believe the most recent thought is at least that we'd hire a consultant to do the design work so we can get an accurate Class B estimate so that it can then be divided in those development agreements.
And who would pay for that?
Potentially the district up front, but then those costs are covered in the agreements.
Engineering studies are usually considered to be capital costs of the project that they're associated with, so eventually they'd go into the full capital cost.
Okay. So I noticed that with these traffic studies that were done, Clayton's actually withdrew some of their lots from they had them in for development. So how has the withdrawal of the Clayton lots impacted the cost and the work slated to be done?
That is something that Binney could answer better, but they were not unable to actually come tonight. They did give us that did have a fairly big impact, and that's the biggest change really between the March 29th study and this most recent study, the withdrawal of those units and so the reduction of those units.
So if a developer withdraws a number of units that originally had been slated, do they then enter into a covenant not to reintroduce those within a particular period of time? So we've noticed on a number of the developments in West Sechelt and in the Clayton lands in particular that there have been rezoning requests even in our term to go from R1 to the multi-care home, for example. So if we're going forward with engineering studies and capital costs on the assumption that certain areas won't be developed, is that a hard and fast written agreement, or in 2 years or 3 years with a different council, could they reintroduce those lots?
They could reintroduce those lots. A similar process would probably have to be done on that individual basis for those as well.
But it could change the entire traffic impact study if they're not out. If the assumption is we're looking at a 20 to 35 window and they're not going to be phased in the first, say, 5-10 years, but we're looking at trying to capture the full costs of development over the build out of that West Sechelt area. It's 2017 now, it's going to be built out by 2035. And it seems like a shell game to be moving things in and out of consideration. It seems to me we want to consider what the build out is.
And that was considered looking at the full build out of the entire area. With this traffic impact study, we're looking at what we just currently have on the books for the developments, and if there is changes to applications down the line, or things, especially things changes to the OCP down the line that could change units, that would have to be a study done by that individual proponent at that time, which could then increase capital. If there's a big increase of capital cost, then that person may have to bear it all at that time.
Okay, so future development will look after future needs that may come for road surveys. Okay, and I just wanted to note we do have some engineering staff with us as well, and Public Works and Operations and Finance if there are questions from councillors. Councillor Seegers, continue.
again, a question from Mr. Parfit was, what is going to trigger the contribution and when? Given that this traffic impact study is looking up to 2035, that's 18 years from now, I have to assume that those lots that Clayton's have now put on the back burner are going to be coming forward. There's a huge demand for lots in the community. I have to assume that they're going to come in there. So the impact of that would be, first of all, what triggers it? And then, are we looking at a pro rata or a straight contribution? Or are we looking at a latecomers agreement? If we're looking at latecomers, that actually is going to penalize those who are coming in first. They're going to be required to put up more money up front, and then those coming in after could delay, potentially, and could impact the contribution of the first ones and how much they're actually going to get back.
And just as you answer that, latecomer agreements are usually limited to 10 years?
15.
15, thank you.
Sorry, what was the first? I had answered the first part of the question, but now I seem to have forgotten the first part of the question.
Triggering of the contributions.
Oh, yes. So it depends on the nature of the project. For, say, the Clayton's family lots, the single-family lots, those would probably be treated at subdivision. So then it's, of course, paid by the developer and not, say, the individual person coming and building a home on there that might be surprised by a large capital cost. For, say, a facility such as the Westbrook by the Sea, that would be triggered at building permit, most likely. So,
any further questions and clarifications?
No, but as a developer, at this point, they don't know what it's going to cost them. They do know a percentage, right? They know a percentage, but they don't know what the quantity is, which could really impact their building. It's like
Yes.
asking for a blank check.
Not exactly.
Almost at this
It's like
point.
asking for a contribution to a fixed cost that is going to be determined as we move forward. We're going to be getting Class B estimates.
Except we're not going to have that. We don't have that now going to public hearing. That'll be coming down the road. And it's saying the exact wording is not required prior to the public hearing. So we're going to public hearing without them having that information.
The roads have to be built. We know that. Development will pay for the cost of that. We know that. And I guess if the costs are too high for development, they won't proceed. We know that because it's a voluntary private sector economy. Nobody's going to force anyone to build anything if they don't want to do it. And if they want to build it, they're going to contribute their fair share to those projects. And between developers, all of the developers are going to have to contribute. I'm not quite sure what happens if one developer goes forward contributing 40% of the costs and other developers pull back and say, oh, well, for this amount of money, we'll wait for 15 years. And I guess the district moves forward, or we have half-built roads, which I have seen in some municipalities. Staff, help us on that one. Councillor Lutz, I noticed your light is on.
To my mind, this second recommendation is around the public hearings, not the costs. And the public hearing is more for the impact on the community, not the developer. So I don't think it should hold up the public hearing in any way.
Except the public always wants to know at the public hearing how the traffic will be dealt with. That's one of the first questions. That's one of the reasons we've held these back. So now we have the traffic studies. We know how the traffic will be dealt with. What we don't know is who will pay for it, which is the thing we have to think about. Go back to the first question. Do we need to receive the July 28th Binney traffic study tonight or not? Or just before public hearing?
You don't have to officially receive it as a council motion. It just has to be part of the public record that anyone can view. So a motion isn't necessary, but it could be a useful thing if you'd like to officially receive it. So
Some councillors think we should. So Councillor Shanks can move that we have received the Binney traffic impact study on the Spaney Development Limited and Clayton Family Lands Limited. Is that the study? The right name for it?
I've been referring to it by the RF, Binney and Associates study dated July 28th.
Okay. That's a good name for it. And seconded by Councillor Lutz. And we have all had it over the weekend. So all those in favor? It's been received. That's good. Now we've got the public hearings to go forward with the concern in some councillors' mind that we don't want to get to a public hearing that then gets derailed as the costs, but that would happen after public hearing, right? So we still find out if the public is supportive of these going forward, and we know what the traffic impact will be, so they can consider that. So do I have anyone to move recommendation 2? Councillor Lutz and Councillor Inkster. Any discussion of recommendation number 2? Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I think it's important that we go to the public with this. I'm not exactly sure of the dates. I hope it's soon, although it is August. So I guess it will be as soon as we can in September. It's just really important that these particular developments that have been in the public eye and have been in front of the public previously, with the support that we know that was in existence for them, go forward as soon as possible to hear from the public again, and that they move forward as they should have a number of months ago. So that's where my support lays.
Okay, and Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I do want to see these go to public hearing, and I still think there's a lot of information that needs to be sorted with the developers. And another piece that Mr. Parfit brought up was MOTI. So we need to get MOTI involved in this as well, because they have already identified that Shorncliffe and Highway 101 intersection has required some upgrades. We have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, there's items to be sorted out as we get all the right players in the room to do what is public highways and private development and municipal roadways. Councillor Shanks.
Your Worship, I'd just like to clarify if in fact those costs are going to be determined for infrastructure requirements. And at some time, would it be available?
Yeah, when do you think the Class B estimates will be coming? Does Mr. Kootenai know that, or? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So that we start with the designs, that'll be contracted out. That can happen this year. And then with those designs, we get quantities estimates.
Okay.
And more developers will want to be involved in each stage of that, because they'll want to review the designs to make sure that it's appropriate for the conditions and our requirements. And they'll also want to be involved in assessing the cost estimates, because they'll have their own sense of what costs are. Okay. Any further discussion? I'm with those that want to get this back on the track into the public hearing and through. All those in favor? Any opposed? One small step. I think we heard clearly some of the concerns that were raised during the delegation, and you heard the councillor repeat some of those. So we'll be able to follow through and try and ensure we can sort this out as we move forward. Item 11, reports from councillors. If I could start on my left with Councillor Inkster, because then he gets to bookend it with his regional district report after we've done council reports. Councillor Inkster.
Thanks. Thank you. I like books. The end of July was, other than meetings and the events that preceded that for council with a number of the public and events, it was mainly just meetings and a number of meetings over the last couple of weeks, as has been presented tonight in minutes. We also had just a couple of days ago, I think it was last evening, the epic baseball game and delicious hot dog night. I throw that out there to see if the mayor will squirm when I say delicious hot dogs.
There were veggie dogs.
They were okay. And so just to see what his reaction would be when he squirmed maybe a little bit with hot dog. Anyway, that was the last couple of weeks, and I look forward to more information to present in my RD report.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Worship. Attended a workshop on Sea Watch, attended the Planning and Development Committee meeting, Public Works Committee meeting, Committee of the Whole earlier today, and then I attended the annual general meeting for the Sunshine Coast Community Services. It's been a light 2 weeks since the last council meeting. Hasn't been that many meetings, so it must be summertime. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that report. I was just going to say, every time I go for a walk, I see you sitting out in front of Pier 17 with your buddies. So it must be summertime. That's where Councillor Wright can be found. Councillor Seegers,
Now we know.
of softball fame, I understand.
Yes. Last week Thursday, or 2 weeks ago Thursday, we had an announcement by Trellis that they're potentially considering Gibson's. I just want to say that I was disappointed, but not surprised. Then, what have I done over the last couple of weeks? 2 library fundraising committee meetings, and we have another one tomorrow. We're looking at how do we move fundraising forward for the library renovation project. I as well attended the Sunshine Coast Community Services Society AGM, and they also presented their strat plan, which I know a number of the councillors here were involved in putting together. And then we had a slow pitch game last night. I want to thank staff for putting that together. It's been fun. It's been over 20 years since I played ball. So sometimes the ball goes where I want it to, sometimes it doesn't. But it was fun last night. We had 21 people out playing, and we ended up with hot dogs, etc. But we have some players who've never played before. So, and then some of us who have played but don't know the rules of slow pitch. So we get put out when we, touch the base, for example, or the ball falls where we think it's not a strike, but it is. And so it's a lot of fun. Earlier today, we had the age-friendly plan presented, and we had some good discussion around that. So I thank staff for bringing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. And Councillor Lutz.
Yes, it has been a slow couple of weeks, summer motion, I guess. Committee meetings, workshops, all the things that have been mentioned is all that's happened in my work life this last 2 weeks. So that's my report.
Thank you. And Councillor Shanks.
Well, I'm sorry I missed the slow pitch. I would have bought my cricket bat. Much bigger surface to hit that little ball. Last couple of weeks I attended the SDBA meeting on Monday night. There's a controversial draft letter that's maybe coming to Sechelt Council in terms of various developments that have been held up and the potential loss of trellis and so forth and so on. So we had some good discussion, and I reiterated my position in terms of being their liaison and wish these matters would come up when I actually attend their meetings rather than after the fact. Aside from that, I'd like to thank Perry Schmidt and John Devison for having a meeting with me on the 19th of July to sort out the details of putting on probably one of the biggest car shows that the West Coast has, and that's our car show coming up, Coasters Car Show coming up on August the 11th and 12th. And I invite the public to participate in that, especially the Rod Run, which takes place at 6:30 on August the 11th. It goes along Ocean Avenue, Shorncliffe, and out the highway to Red Roos Road to the fire hall there, and then returns. And conceivably, we'll have 400 to 450 cars participating in that, and we anticipate in the range of 350 to 390 cars in the car show on Saturday. Everything comes together with the work of so many people involved, and we do appreciate some of the gratis work and so forth that the municipality provides for that event. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Thank you. Oh, sorry. And we're privileged to have our mayor there presenting the Mayor's Trophy Award at 3 o'clock.
I was glad for the reminder of the Rod Run the night before.
Yeah.
I want to talk about how how those of us without hot cars get to participate in that. Because it's the event of the year. Thank you for that report. Yeah, a lot of good weekends coming up, including the Festival of the Written Arts, Hackett Park Craft Fair, the Coasters Car Club, and it was actually a fairly busy week last week with business in the district, but that'll all come out as time goes on. Regional District report from our director at the Regional District.
Thank you. It's kind of fun to pick the cars at the show and shine, although I couldn't ever year by year get past the Camaros and the Corvettes. It's the only I looked at all the others, and I guess it's generational because those were the ones I always picked. It was either a vet, two vets, and a Camaro. So the Regional District. I just wanted to mention a number of things that happened there in terms of information presented. One of the sheets I will provide to council in the form of a photocopy that I have with me now, and it just traces the debt levels, interestingly enough, at the Regional District, but they also, as we know, we borrow through them. So they actually traced the debt levels of municipalities in the Regional District. Over the last number of years, as we know, the rec facilities came online in 2007, and the debt levels was up above 25 million at the Regional District. Now, interestingly enough, it's just above 15. And there's not many years left in that particular rec facility portion of the debt levels. I think it's 10 years or something like that. So that's a good sign, as long as and I've questioned the Regional District, and as they are financially organized much like us, they're putting money aside for the replenishment of those facilities, because that's what I asked for. Once they're paid off, then what? And there's money being put aside. I hope it's enough to continue replenishing the facilities, because basically you have, within a number of years, recreational facilities that are paid for by the taxpayers and of still decent value and decent use by the community. I wanted to also mention the policing priorities that we discussed at the Regional District. They're a little bit different from the District of Sechelt. There was a focus on a little bit of a heavy discussion of opioids and the concern on the Sunshine Coast with that, and how the police should focus, if possible, on that particular issue coast-wide, and how to deal with it, and that being a big priority. I wanted to also mention at the end of this report what I thought was the biggest presentation to us that Councillor Shanks was also very much interested in, and that was the Regional District. The CEO of BC Ferries came and spoke to the Regional District Board members, Mark Collins, and I hadn't actually met the previous CEO, which is interesting, and I know that I had been told that this CEO has been up here a number of times. So that's, unless I read the last tenure wrong, that's quite a departure. Mm-hmm. So it's good to see the CEO up here. That tells us that they're definitely interested in Route 3, which is our route, and what goes on here, and not only the heavy use during the summer, but also the commuter use, which I think is around 700, have we heard? 700 to 1,000 commuter use. So obviously we have to continue to make that service usable by those people, and make sure that the Regional District bus service connects up with those, so that the people that commute continue to live on the Sunshine Coast, buy houses here and shop and spend their money here and school their kids here, as well as use the ferry easily. The big issue that was discussed was the hourly service that a number of people enjoyed. And what was presented there was, you look at hourly service, and what was discussed quite heavily was, how do you do that? The issue with the hourly service is turnaround time. How do you turn around a ferry and unload and load a ferry in busy summer season within an hour? So how do you get cars on and off, as well as the 40-minute trip across and an hour? Because as soon as you go over an hour, whether it's high volume, which is quite normal in the summer months, which, by the way, if we've looked around, I think summer now starts in April, it appears, and ends in October, so it seems a little longer. And obviously, when you go on our highway, you see a lot more cars up here because the weather's so beautiful. There's a lot of stuff coming off the ferry. So we've determined through discussion, and was presented to us, that it appears that the weakness to the ferry system, as far as they've done an analysis is the Horseshoe Bay side of the ferry. How do you move cars in and out of there quickly enough to load onto the ferry? That appears to be what the weakness was presented to us. So how do they meet that? It will be a large capital cost to improve the Horseshoe Bay piece and how to work on that particular piece in terms of entering the ferry. The other issue is that a lot of us don't know about is because our ferries, the way they're built and the way the ramps are built, they can't move cars on and off there very quick because of the fact that you can't see when you enter the ferry. As you go up over the ramp, you can't see, it's dark in there and you can't see up over the ramp. We were told that the cars enter our ferry at 2 kilometers an hour and that at Tawasin they can load them at 20 kilometers an hour. So that tells you the difference in speed of load and speed of I guess we'd call it deloading the ferry. So I just want to make sure that I have, I just also wanted to mention some capital expenditures that they were talking about doing on the, it's all on the ferry-wide system, but they've done a number of it in Horseshoe Bay, and as I've identified a weakness they've identified in Horseshoe Bay, they're looking at how do we fix that, but that's going to take a lot of work because as we know, the local travelers, there's not a lot of room there anymore to do much more work than they've already done. So the capital program they put in place. I was mentioned that the 13 years before 2003, which was when it became a corporation or a different entity, the capital spending was 1.1 billion. The 13 years since to now was 2.4, and the plan is going forward 3.1. And I should mention that the issue of reducing fares was brought up, and the simple solution is if we reduce fares, what that would most likely mean, because we know that the money to the ferry comes mostly from what they earn on the ferries through gift shop and cafeteria sales. If you reduce the fare to get on the ferry, that just then means most likely that the provincial government steps up the amount of money to cover the difference. That's how simple that is. And that was explained to us quite clearly, and I think most people who ride the ferries, who look at the finances, know that that's the solution. If they will reduce fares and or expect different levels of service, they just have to step up with an additional level of contribution to the ferry system. And that's my report, and I'll pass 2 pieces of information, one to Councillor Shanks and the rest to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And they explained that if the provincial government steps up, that's taxpayers.
I hope people know that that's what that means.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for your report and for the work at the Regional District. Moving to our last item today, 12.2, a motion to receive the council correspondence. In front of us, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? And of the 4 items before us, are there any that need discussion? And I will just say I really appreciate the 3rd column that we now got on our agenda, which is the action item, so we know where things are going. The final one will be when we get something that tells us the action has happened or what's come out. So that's great, but it really moves things along for us. Having said that, I think that's true because nobody's pulling out any of those. Oh, Councillor Lutz would like to.
Yes. Sorry. I would like to pull the item on abandoned vessels from our not our member of parliament, but Sheila Malcolmson around Bill C-352. I think that we should endorse the motion of support for that bill that she wants to take to legislation in the fall.
Take that as a motion.
Yes.
Seconded by? Okay. Enthusiasm. I thought we might want to stay out of federal politics.
Never.
Just on the motion to endorse as a council the work of Sheila Malcolmson. So that was moved by Councillor Lutz, seconded by Councillor Inkster. All those in favor? Can I just speak to that? If yes. If there's anything to say.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just, I guess, the content that's still in question. The Sheila Malcolmson, I understand what you're saying. She's not a member of the government, but Sheila MP Malcolmson, as I've mentioned before, I worked very hard with in 2009-10 on the Derelict Vessel Committee of the AVICC, and I think it's one of her mandates to keep driving that forward as well as some recently elected members like Adam Olson as part of the Green Party, were very key members of that committee. He's now an MLA, so I think it's a good time to support those that want to help us clean up our waters.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in light of item number 2, which is bringing an email telling us that there was a derelict vessel, okay, in Porpoise Bay, I think we probably should show that, support that letter to the Member of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to note that the current government and our MP has also been working on this, but we probably want more. We probably want more. Anything else from correspondence this evening? Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Shanks, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? Thank you. 8:25. Pam.